everyone, and welcome to the Lyme March Online. We are so excited that you are here joining us and being a Lyme advocate for your family, your friends, your loved ones, yourself. And so we're just so excited that you've come together on this day to help make change for the Lyme community. We have so much in store between guest speakers and impact activities and special music. So we just have a lot in store for today. I want to especially thank all of our financial sponsors, specifically the Mile High Title Research Company, as well as Enid from the Lyme Center of Martha's Vineyard, for helping us to put this together financially. There's no way we could have done it without your help, as well as all of our other financial sponsors that you can find in our event tab. And I also want to thank all of our volunteers that came together and helped us put this event on. No matter how big or little your job was, your involvement was absolutely crucial in helping us put this event on. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, everyone who helped with this event. So I'm excited to present next the We Are Stronger Together video of all the different Lyme warriors that sent us their pictures or their messages. And thank you, Paul Anderson, for putting this together. So I'm proud to present We Are Stronger Together.
My name is Tanya Gill, and I suffer from Lyme disease and co-infections. I'm making this video for the Green Envelope Project 2020 Lyme March. I'm here to say that even though we're sick and in our beds, you can do something from your bed. Sign petitions. You can join the online march right here from your bed. We are Lyme warriors. Remember that. We can fight this, but we've got to do it together. So I just wanted to encourage you and to remind you that you are a warrior and you rock.
I just want people to know that you're not alone. Get up, grab your brothers and sisters, dust your shoulders off, and keep fighting, because the future is depending on us. We're the ones that are going to change the future for the children who are going to have to be dealing with Lyme disease. I hope that my story can give some people some hope. Everybody keep healing out there, keep detoxing, getting your lymph system going. Remember that we're stronger together.
My name is Carol Gretzky. My Lyme journey started 10 years ago with my entire family getting Lyme disease, with my daughter having it the worst. I am very grateful that she has healed completely, and I want to give other people hope that they can heal too. I feel very strongly that if we all work together, we can bring about the necessary change and awareness that we need. Thank you.
Helen Keller once said, "Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much." Anything worth fighting for can be accomplished through strength in numbers. We're all part of the equation, and that means you too. Together, we can bring change.
Hi everyone, I am here like you today at our virtual Lyme March to unite and fight against Lyme. We are so excited that you're here as a community to take action, learn, and show your support. We want you to know that your voice truly does matter, and together we really will make a difference. Unity is such a powerful thing, and we really are stronger together.
We need to recognize chronic Lyme with a proper case definition. First, we need to ask the question, what is a case definition and why is it important? According to the CDC website, a case definition is a set of standard criteria for classifying whether a person has a particular disease, syndrome, or other health condition. Some case definitions, particularly those used for national surveillance, have been developed and adopted as national standards that ensure comparability. Use of an agreed-upon standard case definition ensures that every case is equivalent, regardless of where or when it occurred or who identified it. Furthermore, the number of cases or rate of disease identified at one time or place can be compared to a rate or number from another time and place. This means that we need a case definition to identify if one has a disease and to identify how many have it and in what areas it's more prevalent in. We can see how not having an accurate case definition can significantly impact the understanding of a pervasiveness of a disease, thus impacting the diagnosis and treatment of Lyme disease. We need to recognize chronic Lyme with a proper case definition and change the current Lyme case definition to ensure that the hundreds of thousands that are currently being missed in diagnosis get counted. The current case definition for Lyme disease was altered decades ago, and the result of that change has made it more difficult for patients to get diagnosed. Physicians rely upon case definition to accurately diagnose patients. Since this definition is so strict, this causes the majority of Lyme patients to be misdiagnosed for several reasons. First, physicians often look for a bullseye rash as evidence of possible Lyme disease. However, it has been shown that there is a low percentage of individuals who get the bullseye rash or notice it, although most places will cite a high occurrence of EM or bullseye rash of about 70 to 80%. These rates are varying. Even a research article published by CDC states that 30% of the time, the rash is not present, and an additional 25 to 30%, it's an uncharacteristic of the typical bullseye rash. If doctors and patients do not know to look for atypical rashes, this would mean over 50% of cases where this symptom would go unrecognized. Yet, another study shows that the classic bullseye rash is only present in 9% of the cases, with 50% of them being uncharacteristic. Simple math would show how looking for a classic bullseye rash interferes with the diagnosis of Lyme patients. The CDC estimates that 300,000 individuals are infected yearly, but only 30,000 of the cases are diagnosed. 9% of 300,000 is 27,000. Very close to the 30,000 mark we see in the US for reported cases of Lyme disease. If the classic bullseye rash were truly present in 70 to 80% of the cases, and doctors knew what to look for, the number of officially reported cases would be much higher. Secondly, physicians rely upon testing to confirm the diagnosis, especially if the diagnosis looks very similar to many others. Testing currently for Lyme disease still uses the same testing that they've used for decades. This test was altered to make it more stringent so that individuals who would be considered positive are now considered negative. This was done even with the knowledge that the prior case definition regarding laboratory testing would result in a high rate of misdiagnosis. As a result, physicians are utilizing faulty testing to misdiagnose patients. The CDC states that current testing is not designed for diagnostic purposes. However, it is still a part of the guidelines for treatment, causing many physicians to not treat unless they have a positive result for Lyme disease. The other aspect of this testing that is mounting evidence to show that Lyme disease is causing immunosuppression, which could turn a false negative due to the fact that the test is looking for an immune response. Like the bullseye rash, federal sites show a high positivity rate with two-tiered testing, but other research shows elsewhere that between 56 and 90% are false negative. As this other data is not shown on the CDC website, physicians trust that a negative means a negative and will not treat on symptoms alone. The last aspect is that physicians diagnose based off of high incident rate states. States where Lyme disease is more common. Many physicians will not diagnose someone with Lyme disease or even refuse to test them if they do not believe there is a high incidence of Lyme where they live. The main issue with this is that obviously diagnosis is severely underreported, so states that may have a higher incident rate are actually being missed. Lyme has been reported in all 50 states, so this claim by some physicians that it's not in their state is incorrect. Even if an incident is low in a state, if one shows signs and symptoms of an illness, a test should be done regardless, but it's commonly not. Without a proper case definition, the ability to determine how many have that illness is hampered. The CDC estimates that 300,000 cases occur each year. But this has been estimated because they know that many patients are being missed. If your case definition does not allow you to actively identify how many patients are truly being afflicted by an illness, this case definition needs to be changed. The truth is, we don't have a good picture of how far spread this disease goes, and that responsibility falls back on the CDC. Not only have they failed in identifying the pervasiveness of Lyme disease, but they also failed to identify the widespread increase of chronically ill Lyme patients. The only answer they give us is that some do have chronic symptoms after treatment. Independent researchers, however, have approximated numbers of persistent symptom sufferers to close to 2 million people in the year 2020. And that only continues to grow. How can one look at 2 million as a number and say a few have persistent symptoms? The closest we have to a case definition for chronic Lyme symptoms is symptoms lasting 6 months after treatment. If it is identified, these patients are told they have post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, or PTLDS. The CDC states they don't know what causes this continuation of symptoms and throw out possible scenarios, but admit there is no proven treatment for post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. They also state that most of the time, patients with PTLDS usually get better over time, but it can take months for them to feel completely well. As patients with these continuing symptoms can attest, we know that this last statement is incorrect. The term post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome is harmful to patients because the diagnosis denies them of care and coverage from insurance companies. Although peer-reviewed articles show evidence of ongoing infectious activity, the acceptance of that in terminology for diagnosis has been met with resistance and refusal. The CDC discourages the use of the term chronic Lyme because they believe it leads to confusion where chronic Lyme is being labeled as things that are not Lyme disease. Yet, where's their evidence to this? Using this claim, they identify one case study of misdiagnosis and a couple of adverse events of long-term antibiotic therapy to support their stance. However, the reality is there's little evidence to say that the diagnosis of chronic Lyme is a cause of massive misdiagnosis and unnecessary treatment. Current statistics show that patients with Lyme have reported 72% of the time they were initially misdiagnosed. Where's the concern for that? Yet chronic symptoms, along with evidence of persistent infection, is confusing. Currently, physicians are taught that the treatment guidelines will take care of the infection, leaving the only other treatment option for long-term symptoms to mainly consist of antidepressants. This term needs to be changed if patients are to be taken seriously. as many doctors do not believe that the patients are truly ill, but rather are cured of Lyme disease and are just depressed. This is simply not true, as many of us can attest to. Without a proper case definition for both the acute and late stages of Lyme, as well as chronic forms of Lyme disease, patients will continue to suffer and not get the treatments they need. Physicians will continue to struggle with the proper diagnosis of their patients, leading hundreds of thousands down the same road the rest of chronic Lyme sufferers are already on. We need a proper case definition. We need to be taken seriously.
Hi, everyone. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over our second ask. And this ask, we're going to talk about the need for effective testing, treatment, and the reimbursement of treatment, because there's a serious lack of that in the Lyme community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. In 1990, over 30 years ago, the first national conference on Lyme disease testing was held. During this meeting, co-sponsored between the CDC, FDA, and Association of State and Territorial Public Health Laboratory Directors, they reviewed data and determined that when using the 1988 case definition of Lyme disease, that there was no association between the case definition and positive results. That patients that met the criteria of Lyme disease would be less likely to test positive, except for a small group in which they suffered from Lyme arthritis. They concluded, and I quote, "The true sensitivity and specificity of serologic tests cannot be determined until measured against an acceptable standard. At present, the only gold standard for Lyme disease is isolation of B. burgdorferi from clinical material, which is a time-consuming procedure. It is concluded, however, that until such comparisons are made and standardized methods established, serologic testing for Lyme disease will result in a high rate of misdiagnosis," end quote. Despite knowledge of this ineffective serology testing in 1995, they determined that not only will this be the main form of testing, but to make that testing more stringent. Even with the understanding that the sickest patients show up as negative, this decision effectively caused even more patients to be missed in the 30 years since that decision. We are still utilizing serology testing to this day, even though that it's known that this test is ineffective, specifically for those who do not have the arthritic form of Lyme disease, which was mirrored in subsequent research studies. With ineffective testing and symptoms that mirror other illnesses, physicians continue to be hesitant to diagnose and treat Lyme disease. Until this is remedied and effective testing strategies can be implemented, patients will continue to suffer misdiagnosis. Treatment for Lyme disease has altered little in the 30 years since the restrictive set of criteria was established. Patients, if lucky enough to get diagnosed, are given only a few weeks of antibiotics and told if they have continued symptoms, it is either due to something else or the unknown cause post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. Although the CDC admits there's no test to prove that bacteria has been successfully eradicated, the resolution of the idea that there is no evidence of active infection has been pushed for decades, except there is evidence to show persistent infection, 230 peer-reviewed studies, in fact. Difficult to treat bacterial infections are nothing new. Infections such as TB need to be treated using long-term antibiotics. The resistance to looking at the possibility of treating difficult to treat Lyme infection does not scientifically make sense. Just because a certain set of research showed that long-term antibiotic therapy was not effective does not mean that an ongoing infection is not present. All it shows is that that particular set of antibiotics for that period of time was not helpful in eradicating the bacteria. That cannot be used as evidence that ongoing infection is not present. This is not effective use of using research to better medical advancement. The new recommendation of one-dose prophylaxis is another area in which research is very poorly executed, yet is considered acceptable and put in as recommendation. The CDC website indicates that a person should receive one dose of antibiotic after a tick bite. This is recommended despite evidence that is inconclusive of its effectiveness. It's been consistently repeated that research regarding persistent infection is either poor, too old, or just animal trials, which is why many who are critical of the chronic infection theory base their reasoning. However, in the case of the one-dose prophylaxis, it appears that concern is no longer valid. It seems that the need for solid research is needed only when it suits their narrative. With this new recommendation guidelines, patients that have come to their doctor with positive clinical signs for Lyme disease and a tick bite were only given one dose of antibiotics, as physicians interpreted this as the new protocol, often causing these patients to not get the full dosage that a patient with Lyme disease should receive per current guidelines, worsening outcome for these patients. The Infectious Disease Society of America, IDSA, has been at odds with the International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, ILADS, in terms of treatment. ILADS looks at the persistent infection as the possibility and are doing what they can to create guidelines to guide physicians to help their patients with their persistent symptoms. However, the IDSA's recommendations are what have been pushed for decades, and that has been the building blocks for insurance companies' reimbursement. They have refused to include persistent infection research and continue to push their 2 to 4 weeks of antibiotics throughout the years. They have failed to live up to their slogan, advancing science, improving care. They've done neither these past 30 years. To get effective treatment, we need recognition that Lyme is the cause of persistent symptoms, that it is real, and that all avenues should be pursued with rigor instead of dismissed entirely. It is time that cherry picking of data, or what is considered good research, only when it's appropriate to one's narrative, stops. Only then can we start making headway that is 30 years late. Due to the lack of effective testing and treatment guidelines, insurance companies deny patients treatment. Should a physician want to go off ILAD's recommendations instead of the IDSA's, the treatment's not covered, and the physician may lose their license depending upon that state's medical board. There are no medical codes for persistent Lyme symptoms. This means that insurance companies can deny paying for any treatment in regards to chronic symptoms, or they go against current CDC and IDSA recommendations. This leaves the patient to have to cover all their own medical expenses that often lead to bankruptcy or lack of getting treatment at all. It all creates a perfect storm: lack of effective testing, ineffective treatment guidelines, the inability to stray from those guidelines for the betterment of the patient, and the insurance company's use of the current approved IDSA guidelines keeps the patient from being covered. Until all three of these are resolved, patients will continue to suffer, and the CDC, IDSA, NIH, and HHS have all allowed it to happen. Over 30 years of dismissal. This needs to change, and it needs to change now.
Hi, my name is Dr. Enid Haller. I founded the Lyme Support Group of Martha's Vineyard and the Lyme Center of Martha's Vineyard in 2008. Myself and my family have suffered from chronic Lyme since 2007 and have now been in remission for 3 years. It's been difficult and a very difficult struggle for the last 11 years to continue to fight the powers that be who control Lyme here in the Vineyard and in Washington, D.C. In 2017, I was appointed to the Tick-Borne Disease Working Group Subcommittee Patient Access to Care at HHS for 1 term. And the next year, I was appointed to the Tick-Borne Disease Research Program with the DoD, Department of Defense, and served 1 term there as well. While I served, I found that there were many conflicts of interest in the Tick-Borne Disease Working Group. It was shocking to me that there were and still are chronic Lyme deniers in Washington who are running some of these federal Lyme organizations. Ted Kennedy and Karen Forstner from the Lyme Disease Foundation formed a Senate hearing 20 years ago, but nothing became of it. It's time to have another federal hearing to finally get things out in the open and investigate who has been holding up progress with Lyme. Transparency is of the utmost importance here. Right now, the balance of power is off balance in the tick-borne disease working group. And the working group now consists mostly of people who have a vested interest in Lyme. I propose that we strike a balance in the third year of the tick-borne disease working group with equal participation of Lyme advocates and Lyme literate doctors. Having members on the committee whose motives are anything but in the patient's best interests is not productive. Over 30 years of lack of progress for the Lyme disease community. The question that should be asked is why? Why, after the CDC, the FDA, and the FDA admitted to their national conference on Lyme disease testing that serology is ineffective, did they opt to not only adopt that as the gold standard, but also make it more stringent? Why are we still using the same faulty testing? Why, with hundreds of peer-reviewed articles showing persistent infection, has the NIH, CDC, IDSA, and others been resistant to entertain the concept of chronic infection? Why has it been decades with nothing to show in regards to scientific or medical improvement for this patient population? These are questions the Lyme community has been asking for years, but it is time that others start asking these questions too. If you or I were to work for a company whose goal it is to protect the public and advance scientific research, but yet over 30 years later, not been able to have a handle on how many people are ill, why they are ill, or how to help, would we be hired there again? Probably not. Our lack of action and progress would have been called into question. Yet the NIH, CDC, HHS, and the IDSA have done just that. These actions, or lack thereof, should be called into question. As we look at the actions or potential reasons for the delay or hesitancy on the parts of these entities concerning pieces come into light. The biggest piece of that being conflict of interest. In the research article, Scientific Journals and Conflict of Interest discloses what progress has been made. It showed that clear evidence exists that industry funding can and does influence research findings. This calls into question how conflict of interest can be influencing research and guidelines for this illness. The Western blot utilized as the current testing for Lyme disease is patented through the CDC and is expected to be granted for 20 years with the expected expiration date of 2033. The new modified two-tier enzyme immunoassay that was just approved by the FDA and added into guidelines on the CDC was patented by Alan Sear, a former employee of the CDC and a part of the 1994 conference that chose to adopt flawed testing. The question of why they accepted to choose testing and make that testing more stringent should also be investigated. It does not seem rational to choose a test that they know will cause a large number of misdiagnoses, or at least to keep with the same test for over 30 years is odd. Looking back at the panel of experts that influenced those decisions, a pattern emerges. The main pattern being a majority of vested financial interest in diagnostic testing, as well as the Lyme vaccines. As odd as it may initially sound, the Lyme vaccine and diagnostic testing are linked, and it all has to do with how the vaccine was created. The vaccine was created by using a protein called OspA that is found on the outside of the bacteria. The concept was that a vaccinated individual would be protected as the OspA would kill the bacteria in the tick's gut prior to the transfer. The issue is that OspA was a part of the Western blot test serology test for Lyme. If that part of the test was included as part of the diagnostic criteria for a positive result, they would be unable to determine if the Lyme vaccine was effective. An important aspect if the vaccine was to get approved. The easiest thing to do was to remove it. The other concept of tightening the diagnostic criteria is that it gave more definitive population. Since Lyme, even in 1994, was a gray area in terms of diagnostics, giving a strict set of criteria helped to give them their Lyme-free population. This calls into question the motives behind the decision decades prior, and that nothing since that time has been done to address it. Over the past several years, some have begun to question and bring to light concerns of conflict of interest especially in 2008, Attorney General of Connecticut concluded an antitrust investigation into the development of Lyme disease guidelines by the IDSA. According to the article, the Infectious Disease Society of America Lyme Guidelines, a cautionary tale about the development of clinical practice guidelines, the following was identified in the conclusion of the investigation. 1. IDSA failed to conduct conflicts of interest reviews of panel members with financial interests in drug companies, Lyme disease diagnostic tests, patents, and consulting arrangements with insurance companies. 2. Gary Wormser, MD, the chair of the panel, was selected inappropriately, held a bias regarding the existence of chronic Lyme, and handpicked a like-minded panel without scrutiny by or formal approval of the IDSA Oversight Committee. 3. The IDSA Lyme disease panel refused to accept or meaningful consider information regarding the existence of chronic Lyme disease. And 4. IDSA blocked the appointment of scientists and physicians who had divergent views on chronic Lyme disease, who sought to serve on the 2006 guidelines panel by informing them that the panel was fully staffed, even though the membership of the panel was later expanded. Although little has changed after the initial lawsuit showcasing these flaws, in 2017, another lawsuit was filed and is still in progress against the IDSA, as well as multiple insurance companies regarding IDSA panelists, working with insurance companies to create guidelines that restricted coverage of treatment. Not only did it seem that they failed the Lyme community in general, but they also failed to improve areas of shortcomings that had come to light. This begs the question, should they be responsible for writing guidelines at all and controlling such an important part of medicine? The Tick-Borne Disease Working Group was established by Congress in 2016 to review federal endeavors for all tick-borne diseases in effects to increase interagency cooperation, avoid overlap, and help to identify priorities. 4 years later, and little has been accomplished to create change. Concern over lack of patient advocacy representation, as well as concern over conflict of interest in panel members have permeated throughout the years. The most recent concern being Dr. Shapiro, added this year to the panel members, one of the defendants in the current lawsuit. He also has served as an expert witness in malpractice suits regarding Lyme disease. A petition was started at the beginning of his acceptance into the panel to have him removed. With now over 30,000 signatures, this has fallen on deaf ears. It is unfortunate that lawsuits are what the Lyme community has to resort to have their concerns addressed. It is time that Congress steps up and demands answers as to why little progress has been made regarding Lyme disease and why conflict of interest is allowed to interfere with research practices and guidelines. Until these conflicts of interest are addressed, the changes forced to be made, little will change for the Lyme community. Patient health and safety must take precedence over financial gain, and those found to be functioning in reverse to this must be held accountable for their actions. I'd like to read a Lyme poem that I wrote several years ago. I am the master of illusion. I am extremely clever and cunning because I know how to mimic things. I'm the great imitator, and I pretend to be one thing, but I'm really another. I know instinctively how to outsmart my opponent, and I know how to manipulate any situation. Given time, I know how to strike at your vulnerable areas and then retreat and hide when it's not safe. When I reemerge, I can pack up and move to a new region to replan my strategy. I've learned how to act innocent and unassuming, then tell a pack of lies and get away with it. I attack the tissues of my host and spiral into the brain, the heart, the joints, the neck, the face, the eyes, and any other organ or limb that I please. I even penetrate the cells, but my favorite place is the central nervous system. Then I annihilate the immune system, rendering my victim helpless. As a result, I cause headaches, stomach aches, tremors, thyroid problems, palsy, anxiety, depression, vision problems, brain fog, and dementia, just to name a few. I can destroy any system without you ever knowing it. If you tell anyone about me, they won't believe you. In fact, they'll call you crazy. Most doctors don't even know I exist, and as a result, don't know how to fight me. I love that people don't understand me and tend to underestimate me. I love that people don't want to talk about me because then I can continue my assault uninterrupted. It's great that people think I'm non-existent because then they won't study me and figure out my vulnerabilities. I'm so smart that I can trick people into believing that I don't even exist. My sister is syphilis, and my children are Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's, MS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and the list goes on. I can kill you and get away with murder. Do you now want to know who I am and if I feel any remorse? My name is chronic Lyme, and I feel nothing.
Hi, I'm Karen Vanderhoof Forshner. I am currently president of the Lyme Disease Foundation in Tolland, Connecticut, lyme.org, O-R-G for our website. I got involved with Lyme disease back in 1985 when I got it while pregnant with my son Jamie. We were in Stamford, Connecticut. My husband was in a partnership training program, and my doctor had no idea what was wrong with me nor what the circular rash was. It was 10 years later and 78 miles away from the supposed Lyme, Connecticut discovery, but nobody knew about it. Information wasn't traveling, and I was the victim. And so was my son, who became, after birth, handicapped, multi-handicapped, and then eventually died. When I looked for help for my son, nobody had a clue what was happening to him. And during a trip to one of his many doctors, the neuro-ophthalmologist, he noticed that there was damage to the back of my son's eye that looked like the children in the Tuskegee study. It was congenital spirochetal infection. I had skipped the trip to the doctors to go down to the medical school and get a book so I could start looking up what was happening to him. I found out that his handicap look was actually Bell's palsy. His face would droop, his head, he had trouble holding his head up, and with his shoulders. He had cranial nerve involvement that affected his tongue, so he couldn't talk, or swallow, so he couldn't eat. He had multiple things going on, and none of them fit any pattern. Eventually, I heard about this thing called Lyme disease and a rash, which my doctors hadn't, but I found that. And I wound up getting a doctor to agree to see and possibly treat him. But on TV at that time, they said you cure yourself like you do AIDS. You don't need treatment. And that was clearly not true for our son, who was in and out of the hospital as his throat collapsed and he couldn't breathe. The Lyme Disease Foundation has conducted over 20 conferences. We've produced 2 award-winning TV programs to get the word out. We have sent educational material to 10,000 schools across the country. We've produced brochures for people with people of different colored skin. We produce programs for workplace so that people who work and go through woods and foresters know how to protect themselves. We also have specialized in making sure minorities and marginalized groups get information that they need. We make sure that pregnant women have access to everything that has been published. Right now, if you go to our website, lyme.org, you will see we have every pregnancy and Lyme article up on that website, free for anyone who needs the information. We also have bilingual programs that are open captioned for the hearing impaired. And when we got a call from someone who was blind complaining that there was no place for them to find information, we went out, got an 800 number, so it would be no cost, and put everything on a push button phone so that she could call in and get any of the answers she needed. We are all well aware that there has been a block to access to care, and that block has been a crummy test. A test that doesn't work, that has been proven in the vaccine trial doesn't work. And I urge you to join us in trying to get more legislation for a better test and to focus on that. We've been here, the Lyme Disease Foundation, for over 20 years trying to find solutions, and we need your involvement. We are going to be working on legislation for a better test. We're going to be working on education to get the word out and funding research to find answers, as well as showing the blocks to access to care that you're all familiar with. After all, our motto is find the truth, tell the truth, and that's what we plan to do. Thank you.
So it is time for our first impact activity. We're going to do impact activity number 1 and impact activity number 2. So in this activity, we're going to be sending letters to the CDC and then a combined letter to the NIH and HHS. And then we're also going to be signing our open letter to these agencies that are going to be similar to the ones that you're going to be sending to specific individuals within these agencies. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the Activities tab on your page. So after this video, you're going to go to that tab again. Click on the Google link under Activity number 1. Once you click on that link, it will open up to a document similar to this. And once that document opens up, then what you're going to do is you're going to click on the Edit tab and click Select All. When you click Select All, what's going to happen is it's going to turn blue. So all the letters are going to turn blue like this. Once it's blue, you're ready to copy it. So there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either right-click on your mouse and press copy, or you can hit Control-C on your computer. Those are your 2 options. If you are on a tablet or on a phone, usually what you have to do is you have to press the screen for a few seconds and the option to copy and paste will come up, and you can do it that way. Once you've copied that, you're going to go back into your Activities tab, and there's going to be email links there. So all you have to do is click on that email link. It'll automatically populate into your email. It'll pop your email open, and then you're going to copy and paste that letter onto your email. So it'll look something like this. So once you click on that email, it'll pop up. It'll automatically populate into your email. You can put a header in there. You can put the header of the letter, or you can put whatever header you would like. Right click again on your mouse or hit Control V, and then the letter will populate into your sheet, and it'll look something like this. Then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to scroll down and sign the bottom. You can add something there personal if you would like. And then you're going to go back and keep doing that until you've done all your emails. And once you're done with all your emails for that specific letter, there's going to be another link that says your open letter link. You're going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to look something like this in the picture, and you're going to sign it just like you sign a lot of your other petitions. Then you're going to do the same activity for activity number 2. Everything that I explained, you're going to do the same activity. So you can go ahead and go to your activity tab now. We'll be back in 10 minutes. If you don't get it done within the 10-minute time frame, that's fine. You can always come back after the event and finish it up. All of these videos and everything will be up during that time frame afterwards. So you should be able to do the same thing if you haven't finished it. So go ahead and head to the activity tab, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.
everybody. It's Bonnie Schall from the National Capital Lyme Disease Association in McLean, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. We are delighted to be here today with your March on Lyme conference, and I want to thank Rebecca, Allison, and Enid for doing this great event. I know it takes a lot of time and effort to put a successful event together, and they have. So I want to thank them for inviting us and making us a part of it. I know how important you all are. I know that you are the frontline group, you are the ACT UP group, and you have been around for quite some time now, and you've made a difference for this community. I can remember the first time the ACT UP Mayday group came into town, and they were down at Lafayette Park, which at the time was right across from the White House, and we were allowed that time to go and picket in front of the White House. Now you can't do that anymore. But we've seen you and been with you in front of the IDSA, picketing there. We've been over outside of the Capitol with you. So we know how devoted you are to this cause, and we want to thank you. We respect you for the work that you do. Today I'm going to speak very briefly on investigative hearings. As you know, our organization, the National Capital Lyme Disease Association, has been involved in legislation as well as various events on the Hill and the HHS working group on Lyme and tick-borne diseases. We think it's really, really important, especially now, to be thinking about trying to do an investigative hearing. The working group is having their problems, as we all know. We're sort of outnumbered. We're not considered anymore to be a part of the subcommittees and getting our representatives in there. And I won't say we're being ramrodded, but I know Pat is up against tremendous opposition, and Dr. Donta. As this comes to a close for this year, there's only one more year left. And if we're not careful, the recommendations that come out of this working group could affect us, you and me, and our children for generations to come. So it's time now to make our voices heard. And an investigative hearing, when you talk about hearings on the Hill, there are three types. One is oversight, one is legislative, and the other one is investigative. Now, of course, the most important one, we feel, is the investigative hearing. We've been asking for an investigative hearing ever since we did that event on the Hill where we brought Andy Abrams into town and Pam Weintraub and showed a clip of Andy's film to about 250 people on the Hill. We did a luncheon that day to get them there. And we felt way back then that this was the most important thing that could happen, because we still don't understand today why this disease has been so negated, so overlooked, so underfunded, and people have had to fight for the recognition and acknowledgement of this disease. So it is time to do an investigative hearing. So this is what we're bringing to you today, the ability to get your voice to the Hill, to your representatives, to your senators, to your congressmen, to the president, to the vice president in an effective way. Voter voice is an instrument we have used for many, many years. It's expensive. I won't kid you, it is very expensive. But it's been effective for us to get our bills through, because people have a tendency, if they're too sick, too tired, don't have the wherewithal to take the time to do it, to not write the letters and to, they'll sign their name on a petition, but when it comes to doing the hard work of writing the letter, it's really hard. And so what Voter Voice does, it gives you a message that's already set up. And all you have to do is put in your zip code and your address and your name, and all the rest is done for you. All those particular people that you want to reach down on the hill or in your state capital are all done automatically for you, and that message is sent to them. Now, on this page that you will see later on today, probably, it'll be shown how you can do it. What you will see is you can add your own message also along with the generic message. The problem is you are limited to a certain amount of words or characters, and so you have to be very precise in what you say. And when you get this, you'll see what we wrote, and you might want to modify that to your own personal situation. But I would suggest that you do this. We will lose the ability to do this within the next week and a half. So I want you to go ahead and do it either today, tomorrow, or the day after, but don't wait, because as of the 17th of September, we lose this software. So anyway, or this service. That's the first thing I wanted to tell you. It's really important that you play your part. Your voice is the most important thing you have, just like voting in this upcoming election. You need to vote, and on this you need to send in your message to your representative, okay? So that's something I wanted to explain to you. If you have a problem using it, give us a call here at NatCap Lyme. The number is 703-821-8822. And our email is natcaplyme@natcaplime.org. Now, back to investigative hearings. They've been done since, of all things, 1792. And they've done investigative hearings on everything from the sinking of the Titanic, the Ku Klux Klan, and, of course, you remember the Watergate hearings. Very, very important. So if they can do that kind of investigative hearing, why can't they do one on Lyme and tick-borne diseases? Because we have all suffered so much, and the injustice is truly there. We need to get the chronic form of this disease recognized, and we need to get funding for treatment for this disease and the kind of research that we need that only comes from government funding. So please do your part. Now, with that, I want to thank you all for inviting us. I will tell you that my husband, we addressed, when we did the inaugural meeting of the Tick-Borne Disease Working Group, we did the first keynote address, and I made that available. Rebecca is going to have it up after I finish speaking. And in that, he lays out all the problems that we as a community have faced over the years. And he also lays out the solutions to those problems. And we came up with this paper, this white paper, because we had input from other groups, including your all's actually. Allison lent her opinions to this, and from all over the country. So it just wasn't something that we came up with. We asked for other opinions. And so I think it's a great watch, and I would ask that you watch it also. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for inviting us, letting us be a part of this, and we want you to have a great conference and want you to know that we really respect what you all do. We respect your passion, and we respect your ability to get out there and try to make a difference. So keep on doing what you do, and if you need our help, just give us a call. Thank you.
In addition to being legal counsel to the National Capital Lyme Disease Association, I am also here because my wife, Monty, has been struggling with tick-borne disease for more than 2 decades. And I have seen the devastation that these diseases have had on hundreds, if not thousands, of people. We've been asked by HHS to comment on 3 important questions. And to answer these questions, we must first acknowledge that tick-borne diseases are a significant problem. because frankly, it has been denied for so long by so many respected professionals. Hopefully, in convening this working group, we will finally gain recognition that tick-borne disease is not simply a medical anecdote, but in fact represents a national health epidemic that must be seriously addressed and conquered. 7 years ago, I was privileged to participate in the Institute of Medicine's workshop, Critical Needs and Gaps in Understanding Tick-Borne Diseases. While that workshop provided important insights, unfortunately, it produced little progress, even with respect to awareness, let alone treatment of tick-borne diseases. Disturbingly, tick-borne illness continues to be discounted by the vast majority of medical professionals, government policymakers, and researchers who cling to the inaccurate belief that Lyme disease is hard to catch and easy to treat. In this regard, please see the cited Holly Ahern presentation. Accordingly, patients are still being misdiagnosed and denied treatment, and the incidence of tick-borne diseases is surging. It is now old news that the CDC currently estimates that more than 300,000 new cases of Lyme disease occur each year, and that number does not include all the other tick-borne diseases, only Lyme. The first question posed was, what would offer the greatest impact on the greatest number of people? The key to any future advancement lies in the development of better diagnostic tools. We desperately need accurate tests for the detection of all tick-borne diseases, tests that are capable of identifying all their stages. Equally important, we must be able to confirm eradication of the pathogens. Such tests will enable us to better characterize both acute and persistent manifestations. We need to abandon the two-tier testing approach. The problem with tests like the ELISA is its dependence on identifiable antibodies, which, as we have learned from Dr. Alcott, may not develop until weeks or months after infection, well after the optimum time to treat tick-borne disease. Public education and patient-informed consent require accurate patient notification of testing reliability, including the potential for a false negative. And this should be recognized in every state, as Maryland and Virginia have done legislatively. Given the current state of research, creating these tests, as well as pioneering research in the field of tick-borne disease, may seem like a tall order. To do this, we have to reach out to new players who offer innovative and creative ideas and look for real solutions. We would like HHS to expand its funding criteria to reach emerging and promising research that comes from fresh and new perspectives. Indeed, instead of these studies that only confirm old results. Here are some examples that offer promise, to which NatCap Lyme has contributed. Dr. Neil Spector of Duke University, researching immune therapy. Dr. Ying Zhang of Johns Hopkins, focusing on antibiotic resistance and bacterial persistence. Dr. Kim Lewis of Northeastern University, researching new antibiotics for persistent bacteria cells. And Dr. John Alcott of Johns Hopkins, this group's chair, with his SLICE study to understand what he calls post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. Most distressing is the fact that the medical community is so strongly divided and the establishment medicine so entrenched in the belief that Lyme is not a problem. You must find ways to bring together all the best minds and theories, examining empirical observation and clinical anecdotal experience, as well as controlled studies. We must never forget that the medical elite thought they knew what caused ulcers and stomach cancer until Barry Marshall drank H. pylori, lighting a better path. Look to the model created by the Alzheimer's Disease Neuroimaging Initiative. Their three-point program was extremely important in moving their research agenda forward. Specifically, their researchers agreed to share all their data, that every finding would be made publicly available immediately, and to renounce ownership and patent rights. Dr. John Trojanowski, a member of that research team, said, "We all realized that we would never get biomarkers unless all of us parked our egos and intellectual property, noses outside the door. NatCap Lyme believes that true solutions to the dilemma of Lyme and tick-borne infections may only be found when all parties are willing to consider the views that each seeks to contribute. We would like to see clinical trials broadened to include patients with persistent Lyme borreliosis, as well as the entrance criteria for clinical trials to include entire classes of Lyme patients whose disease expression and treatment response is poorly understood. We would also like to see treatment trials conducted that better mirror the variety of treatment regimens actually used by treating physicians. The second question posed was how to improve the lives and health of people living with tick-borne diseases. First and foremost, discard the CDC case definition of Lyme disease for diagnosing patients. That definition, designed specifically and only for surveillance, is consistently misused as the definitive diagnostic criteria in the clinical setting. The CDC needs to clarify to all health service providers and health departments that the surveillance case definition was never intended to be used in clinical diagnosis. Patients, medical professionals, and scientists need a better case definition, expanded to include the entire emerging spectrum of Lyme disease and tick-borne co-infections. Stemming the epidemic requires physicians to be competent to recognize, diagnose, and treat tick-borne diseases. Thus, a national education course for medical providers should be developed that reflects the diverse approaches to treatment and diagnosis of tick-borne disease, as well as CME courses. It is critical to support medical providers who practice on the front lines. State medical boards routinely penalize doctors who deviate from the IDSA guidelines by subjecting them to investigations and disciplinary procedures. Many patients lose their doctors who stop treating out of fear of that costly gauntlet, or even of losing their license. When multiple protocols meet the new rigors for publication by the National Guideline Clearinghouse, government favoring one over another places an unnecessary burden on patients needing the disfavored protocol. Physicians must be allowed to treat the patient and the symptoms they present, to practice the true art of medicine, and the patient should have the right to accept that treatment with informed consent. Medical guidelines are designed to provide recommendations, not mandates. Paraphrasing Dr. Walitsky last year at USCA, treat the patient, not the healthcare system. NatCap Lyme says, treat the patient, not the test. Finally, we were asked to discuss methods to prevent new tick-borne infections. Mass media campaigns effectively expose large populations to messages about challenging health risk behaviors. A CDC mass media campaign on awareness, similar to that of the Zika response, would significantly reduce the rate of infection and could relieve society from the extreme economic burden of persistent, incapacitating diseases. A 2015 Johns Hopkins study found that Lyme alone costs the U.S. healthcare system as much as $1.3 billion a year. With indirect costs such as lost wages, that number jumps to many billions. Children ages 5 through 14 face the highest risk of exposure to tick-borne infections. A tick awareness and prevention curriculum should be designed as a learning tool for public, private, and home schools, as well as for educational settings, including camps and youth organizations. And we know the importance of vaccines. While NatCap Lyme would like to see the development of a safe and effective vaccine, a narrow focus on a few strains of Borrelia and a rush to certify a vaccine only offers a limited public health benefit and harbors a serious potential health risk. The perception of protection can be dangerous if the vaccine is not effective against the full range of Borrelia strains and co-infections. In NatCap Lyme's opinion, it is premature to inoculate the general public with a tick-borne disease vaccine. we do hold out hope for a safe and effective vaccine in the future. Lastly, we must make certain that tick-borne diseases such as babesia are not transmitted through the national blood supply, and that proper screening techniques are in place to ensure public health safety. In conclusion, tick-borne diseases erode every facet of an individual's life, decimate marriages and livelihoods, and cause children to leave school and even lose their childhoods. For many, life never returns to normal. The patient community is extremely angry and about the lack of scientific medical progress and the inadequate response from the agencies responsible for the health and welfare of the general public. This anger propels us to insist that our government, medical professionals, insurers, and healthcare system address our needs as we hold these entities and individuals accountable for the delivery of the results upon which our lives depend and for which we have paid as taxpayers. Finally, a quote from the paper we delivered to the IOM: "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is what it takes to sit down and listen." Winston Churchill. Thank you.
are going to start doing our next activity, activity number 4. And with this one, we're going to be sending letters to our congressman. So the way that you want to do this one is you are going to go back to your activities page, just like the last activity. And then there's going to be a Google link there for a pre-made letter if you're not comfortable writing your own, but you also can write your own. You're just going to want to copy that like you did in the previous activity. And then you're going to go back to your activities tab and you're going to go onto the link that says find your representative website. There's a link to do that. And once you get there, you will go ahead and put in your information, your zip code, and then your state. And once you click send or select for those two things, it will pull up the representatives and senators of your state. And the nice thing about this is that there are links to each one. Once you click onto that link, then it will send you to the next page that says that identifies what it is that you want to do. So if you want to call them, if you want to write them a letter, it gives the address, but there's also the website and the contact form. So click contact form to do the letter. To send a letter via email. You can also call them if you would like, but that's an easy way to access the information. Then you're going to go to that when you hit the form button, the contact form, it'll send up their email. And so you're going to fill out the forms in the fields in that form. And at the bottom, there'll be a place to put your message. You either can type your message there, put the pre-formed letter. You could do a pre-formed letter plus whatever else you want to write. They usually have restrictions with numbers, so just be aware of that. But you can do both. And then once you are done putting that message down at the bottom, you're going to send it. Then make sure to go back to that page again and do the rest of your senators or representatives, whoever you haven't done, so that you send a message to all of them. And then that is it. And we'll be back in 10 minutes, so you can go to the activity page now and let your voices be heard. Okay, everyone, we're going to be doing our next impact activity, number 5, and this is called Voter Voice. We're really excited to be able to do this activity with the help specifically of the National Capital Lyme Disease Association, also known as NatCap Lyme. They worked very hard to help get this activity up and running for us, along with all the other names mentioned here. But I just want to specifically mention NatCap Lyme because they did so much hard work to get this done in a very short period of time, and we just thank them for all the hard work that they've done. So with this one, what it is it's a really easy, succinct way to get a message across to all your government officials at the same time. It's a very easy process. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the process, and then afterwards you'll go to your activities tab, like all the other times, to go ahead and do the activity. So when you go to your activities tab, you'll click on the link, and when you click onto that link, it's going to take you to a site. And I kind of have the picture here, but it's split into two sides. The left side kind of gives you the understanding of what they're doing, why it's important, why you should care, and what doing this is going to help to do. And then the right side is the form that you're going to fill out. So I'm going to focus on the right side, the form. I encourage you to sit down and read the left side though when you do click into there. But on the left side, what you're going to see is you're going to see an area where you can add your own personal message here. There is only room for 600 characters, so you need to make your words count. They do say that they really do focus and hone in on individuals that do add a personal message. So if you have the capability to add a personal message, we highly encourage you to add your own personal message along with the message that we have in there, specifically discussing the need for a congressional investigative hearing and the issues with conflicts of interest within the tick-borne disease working group. You're then going to fill in the information, and then you're going to click the send message. And doing this simple form will then send it to all the individuals that you need to send it to all at once. So it's a very easy, fast process, and we're very excited that they were able to put this together for us. So now you're going to go to your activities page. You're going to go ahead and click on that link just like we talked about, and we will resume again in 10 minutes.